Hello, everybody out there, whoever that might be. This is the official album release party for Notes from a Failed State, which is now available on all the usual streaming platforms. So it seemed like, what the heck, I might as well have a little one-person album release party from my living room on live streamed from here. And I don't normally have album release parties because it just always seems like an anticlimactic idea, because actually normally you have an album release party in a town like where you live oftentimes, and that's actually not where I have most of my gigs or most of my tours when I used to do such things. So it wasn't like that idea was all that appealing, unless I could have an album release tour, which is what I did, which is what artists do, like tour on an album, as the saying goes. You release an album and you tour on it. Used to be you toured on it and you sold lots of physical copies of the album, and then you actually toured on it and made money doing that. But nowadays you tour on it in order to get people to hear it for free online. The business model doesn't, is that kind of interesting and bizarre. But anyway, that's how it is now. And now you can find it on all the streaming platforms. And if you do playlists on Spotify, then please playlist it. And I will be able to see any questions or comments you have, any of you out there who might be watching. I'll see them all. Whatever platform you're on, I'll see them. So as I sing these songs, I'll be in between looking at the comments and stuff. So it's sort of a album release party. In the party sense is like if you're commenting. Otherwise, it's like me playing guitar in front of a screen, but that's fine too. I need to practice. And it's nice to do these songs that are on the album because I've practiced them enough that I probably can do them now and remember what key they're in and stuff like that. Good evening to Europe, and good early afternoon to the west coast of the US and Canada, and good late afternoon to those on the East Coast. Let's see. I was going to practice, but I didn't. So. See, of course, if I had practiced, I would have remembered what key I was doing that song in. So, it's the raw deal. I'm glad you like the new album, Jonathan Douglas. On the edge of something, exactly what nobody knows. Whatever the future will bring, whichever way it goes, depends on how we get there, the scope of our demands. Everything's up in the air, wherever we might land. Welcome to the precipice. On the edge of something, you can't stand there for long. Hear the church bells ring, another homecoming song. As the state just pulled the rug and left us to wonder why. As the mass graves are dug for the essential workers sentenced to die. Welcome to the precipice. On the edge of something, so many people say things have got to change now. They can't stay this way. Whatever lies ahead can't be the status quo. Doggy dog is dead. Long may it be so. Welcome to the precipice. That's the first track on the album, and then of course when you're putting together album order, you don't have to think about how often you're changing the tuning. If I were doing it live, it would have then it's more awkward, to change the tuning all the time. But for a live album release party, you guys can maybe put up with it, or Now Mark Manley in Oklahoma says, love the words below the video. Must have been a lot of work. Now, actually, no. Typing those few words took about 20 seconds. And it was a lot of work to write these songs, and the rest of it wasn't. Doing the live stream is not a lot of work. Although doing 5 days a week of live streaming and interviewing all those people and reading their stuff before I interview them, that's a lot of work. But this is just a little bit of practice. Jerry Garcia says, I need multiple guitars. Then I would also certainly need a drum set and a bass player and perhaps a keyboard player and several backup singers. That's what I think would be good if I were to have several guitars, which that's fine. Maybe several. I don't know. One more anyway. Maybe one, two, maybe if they're very tastefully minimalistic. So the stream of nice words coming in from all over North America and Europe are very welcome and lovely. I won't read them all back to you, though, unless somebody is asking a question or something like that, probably. Unless I just randomly feel like singling somebody out for some reason. This is, I guess on the album, this is the only post-rebellion song. Most of the others are post-pandemic, pre-rebellion. This is the second track on the album. Are people still lynched in America? Are people still lynched in America? And what happens when they die? When he begged for his mother to save him? Was he resisting arrest when he cried? How does the lynch mob roam free when we already know who they are? Men who murdered George Floyd and then drove off in their police cars to live with such savage injustice. With every new day the earth turns, I'm left with no reason to wonder as I watch Minneapolis burn. Are people still lynched in America? How many just in the past weeks? From Georgia to Minnesota, as the pandemic spikes and peaks. Did you see him pinned down for 8 minutes? Did you see the knee on his neck? Did you see the police station on fire? Did you smell the smoldering wreck? As the National Guard marches in, watch the wheels of history churn in the land of Philando Castile, as we watch Minneapolis burn. Are people still lynched in America? And do the poor still die of disease? Are the prisons still full of debtors? Do bodies still hang from the trees? Do the workers still live by the highways, still struggle to come up with rent? Do families still get evicted when the last of their credit is spent? Do you see all the people who just had to find out what there might be left to learn from the flames that rise from the target as we watch Minneapolis burn? Are people still lynched in America? And what happens when they die? When he begged for his mother to save him, was he resisting arrest when he cried? My dad is watching. Hello, Howard. Papa. Lovely. That was the second track on the album. I'm just going through my new album here for those who are tuning in late. My new album, Notes from a Failed State, which is now up on all the streaming platforms. The version on Bandcamp has several bonus tracks. And here's the third track on the album. Pandemic is spreading. The health system's collapsing. You can watch it all unfolding on the screen. If you're afraid to go outside, enough groceries to hide, it may have been weeks since you have seen someone you can touch, and you miss it so much as you wonder what might happen next. Like when your savings run out and the choice is all about what kind of help you might be able to expect. Or perhaps when COVID arrived, while some struggle to survive, you were what they call essential. It didn't take long to see you got that wrong. The word they really meant was expendable. It didn't take long to see there was no emergency. Plans in place for something which all the scientists knew was just a matter of when there'd be a pandemic again. And the kleptocrats in power didn't have a clue. Otherwise, why did Jason Hargrove die? Because he kept keeping on, waking before dawn to do his part for society. Jason drove his bus, he didn't even make a fuss at the time of the impropriety. Somebody coughed, the virus was off. Not 2 weeks later, Jason would be dead. What if he had protective gear with sick passengers so near, with no barrier to protect his head? Why did Jason Hargrove die? Stay home, flatten the curve, they say, unless we need you to serve food for us or care for all the ill. In that case, we'll call you a hero, like the workers at Ground Zero, where one by one the cemetery filled. Now in every bus and truck, the drivers try their luck, essentially told, thank you for your service. If these were the front lines, no one put up any signs. Did anybody sign up for this? Why? Did Jason Hargrove die? Once the death rate peaks in days or months or weeks with each one of the virus's waves. Once we can take stock and recover from the shock of the sight of all of the mass graves. Will this be the impetus, this driver on a bus, along with so many, many more? The nurses and the prisoners, seafarers and farm workers, what will they all die for? Why? Did Jason Hargrove die? Why? Did Jason Hargrove die? And thanks for the more kind words. That's at least as good as applause. Seeing posts like that. David, you are a jewel to this continent. Thank you, Tina. And that's the third track about a bus driver in Detroit named Jason Hargrove, one of so many essential so-called workers who have been dying. I was talking to a warehouse worker the other day who was saying that he may be classified as essential, but he was saying nothing in the warehouse is essential, which is an interesting contradiction right there. If he's essential, then they should have essential things in the warehouse. Makes sense. Oh yeah, here's the capo. And the fourth track on the album really, the next two are both inspired by my walks around the city of Portland, Oregon, where I broadcast from right now. It's called As I Walk On By. A little more. The rug pulled out so many times. Who knows where's the floor? Folks look more ragged by the day. I can give them a few bucks. Wonder what the future holds. Wish them luck as I walk on by. Chairs out on a deck. Sometimes you can tell which ones receive their checks. Which ones are still waiting after all these many weeks. Wondering if this is what it smells like up Schitt's Creek as I walk on by. Children ask me, I'm not quite sure what to say. Why the playground's always empty, where the kids all used to play. Why the people go across the street now whenever we come near. Where did all the people go who used to be here? As I walk on by, I go out with my headphones on like everybody else does, listening for news suddenly relevant because we all want to know how the virus might transform all of us still here, weathering this storm. As I walk on by, as I walk on by, as I walk on by. Oh, Mark wondering what the album cover will look like. I strategically put the album cover on the screen. So actually up on my screen, it's in the upper right. I think it's upper right for you too, unless it's reversed, but I'm pretty sure the upper right, that's the album cover. And it's already up on all the streaming platforms, so you can see it on Spotify as well as Bandcamp and wherever else. I love questions like that make me mention, once again, this is an album release party for an album called Notes from a Failed State. And here's another musical note from a failed state. Another song inspired by walking around this city. And, I mean, basically, the way it is now, like, what it's the experience of walking around this city. I mean, I'm sure if you're in other major American cities, it's probably the same. But here, or similar, to a matter of degree. But here in Portland, which is, whatever you hear about Portland, it's a poor city full of rent-burdened, poor people living in little apartments located next to 4, 5, 6-lane roads, breathing smog, getting cancer and dying. That's Portland. That's every city in this country, but it's also Portland. And then there's, of course, the rich people that you hear about who get on TV. And all the, well-off hipsters eating out in the fancy restaurants and talking about how cheap their rent is when they only have to pay $1,500 for a studio. And, but meanwhile, at the end of the month, you will see walking around the city every month, but particularly during the pandemic, it's gotten much, much more extreme that you walk around the city at the end of the month and you will find, living room furniture, large pieces of living room furniture on the sidewalks, in front of apartment complexes, everywhere. Each couch by the street has a story. Some were brand new just last year. Looks like days ago someone had a door key and it was in a living room, not here. Getting covered in leaves falling down, getting soaked each time it rains. Did someone split quickly, head out of town? Perhaps whoever left these coffee stains. Each couch by the street has a story. I wonder what this one may be. Another one too dry to have been out for long. It was once someone's property. Did they leave their home and move into a car, or find a sofa to sleep on at a friend's place? Did they stay near or go away far, disappear with hardly a trace? Each couch by the street has a story, one that ended without a yard sale. No one's buying much in the pandemic. most any such plans are derailed. Along with the crashing economy, all the people who just got the sack. Could just be time for society to have one another's back. Each couch by the street has a story, and those stories will soon multiply. Once the ban on evictions is lifted, once thousands more people have died. While we're here in a country that's failed, when the moratorium is through, when they come to evict your neighbors, what will you do? Each couch by the street has a story. And I can't read my own writing. Oh yeah, rent party. No. Oh yeah. The next two are they're kind of themed in the album. The songs are themed in a lot, in pairs oftentimes, and the next two songs are, very much related to that last song, but also different. The last song and the last two songs were mainly inspired by walking around the city, and these next two songs were inspired more by my own experiences with the Randall Group, the slumlord corporation that owns the building that I live in with my family. And this is a song, I've been putting the lyrics to this song up on telephone poles all over the city for a few months now as a therapeutic activity. You can find the poster that has the lyrics to this song printed out, in PDF or JPEG form at artistsforrentcontrol.org. Then you can click on posters and see the posters we've got. If you want to put up posters that are related to, kind of building community awareness in places like Oregon, where there's a suspension on evictions, which is true of many other states, especially if you're in a state like that, spreading community awareness that this is the situation. And then, a little bit of morale building and a little bit of popular education. It's different things. The lyrics. And then there's other posters I've worked on with the wonderful artist Kalindi Jackson in Florida, who've been collaborating with her on these posters. And there's a suspension on evictions. Stick to your convictions. Don't pay the rent. If at home we have to stay, then most of us can't pay, so don't pay the rent. Tell your landlord, sir, that mortgage can defer. Don't pay the rent. If they start rattling their sabers, say, I need to feed my neighbors, and don't pay the rent. It's time now to demand one big union grand. Don't pay the rent. Neoliberalism is dead. It's time to raise your head and don't pay the rent. Strike for the guarantee, a home for everybody. Don't pay the rent. Running water, housing, healthcare all across this earth we share, yeah. Don't pay the rent. Capitalism has failed, put the billionaires in jail. Don't pay the rent. We need a new world now. Let me tell you how. Don't pay the rent. With mutual aid, a new world can be made. Don't pay the rent. From the ashes of the old, if we stop doing what we're told, and don't pay the rent. Solidarity. with society. Don't pay the rent. Our lives matter a lot. The landlord's profits do not. Don't pay the rent. We can redefine what is theirs and ours and mine. Don't pay the rent. There's a suspension on eviction. Stick to your convictions. Don't pay the rent. Don't pay the rent. And then that's the sort of more like upbeat kind of version of the idea of not paying the rent. And then, yeah. This is more like when we are paying the rent, how much it sucks. Bank is empty. Card is full. And no matter how hard I pull, car don't move. Rent is due. I'm not sure what else to do. Get a job. Perhaps I should. Pulling shots or hauling wood. It's a bit too late right now for that. So in the meantime, here's my hat. 'Cause this world I can't afford. I'm throwing a party for my landlord. 'Cause this world I can't afford. I'm throwing a party for my landlord. My landlord is a company which takes away all my money, as well as that of half the town. They're slumlords, great renown. The Randall Group, the group of Randall. You can bet they don't need to panhandle. They own my building, they might own yours, along with all of your mold spores. 'Cause this world I can't afford. I'm throwing a party for my landlord. 'Cause this world I can't afford. I'm throwing a party for my landlord. 'Cause at the time the rent is due. This is a red line for me, don't know about you. Everything else just comes to a halt when you get thrown out onto the asphalt. Call it funding from the crowd. Sounds so nice, it rhymes with cloud. Call it begging, I don't care, long as Randall gets their share. 'Cause this world I can't afford. I'm throwing a party for my landlord. 'Cause this world I can't afford. I'm throwing a party for my landlord. I'm throwing a party for my landlord. Tar and feather party for the landlord would be a great idea. And actually, tarring and feathering is also a traditional and terrible thing to do to people, but still, it was also in many different, at least some of the rent strikes I've read about in the past. Part of the struggle is not only against the landlord, but also against anybody that isn't joining in the rent strike. You know, these things, people need a little help sometimes. And we're not there yet. Let's see, what key was this next one in? This is album release party for Notes from a Failed State. And that was track number 7, and this is track number 8. Let's see. I think it's track number 8. Let's see if, I mean, it is track number 8, but whether I can play it properly. I didn't actually practice any of these songs since I recorded them a month ago. But when you record an album in a studio, you end up playing the songs a lot, even if it's just like a solo guitar thing. So I think I remember it so far. I remember them all. My right leg fell asleep. Missile strikes in Baghdad. Yeah, skies full of fighter jets. There's some kind of riff here that I don't remember. But let's see. See, that's what this is the song I really should have practiced. Missile strikes in Baghdad. Missile strikes in Baghdad. Skies full of fighter jets. Tension in the air. As thick as it gets. Their talking points are loaded. At each press conference with what passes for an effort at historical reference. They talk of things that happened over 40 years before. That they say now bring us to the edge of world war. They talk about, no, that's not right. No, that's not right. This is, no, we're going to have to, you're going to have to just listen to the album. And, sad to say, because if you want to hear track number 8, then that was the one I really needed to practice before I did the album, and now I don't remember it again. You can blame the pandemic. I mean, you can also blame me for not practicing, but you can blame the pandemic for me not having to practice, which is part of the problem here. Which is why it's good to do these broadcasts, because that's the only thing that gets me to play the guitar. But other than just for fun, which you don't end up doing that much. I mean, and if you're playing guitar, at least me, but if you're playing for fun, it's not to practice songs you already know. It's just to like mess around, right? I mean, at least for me. If I'm practicing, well, I just don't do that really. But when I'm on tour, I get a lot of practice. By the time a typical 2-month tour is over, that's like when my guitar playing is at its peak of, and then the more time I spend at home, the more sort of flaccid my fingers get. And then, and at the beginning of the tour, I'm often like messing everything up at the beginning. The first few shows, they're often not the best, probably. I talk the most in the first few shows because I haven't been on tour for a long time, so then I end up talking a lot, which is just how it is. And then after I've been doing a few gigs, I stop talking so much because I've sort of talked out. And I started learning to play the guitar. Somebody asked a question. I mean, it's not. No, that's okay. You don't have to ask questions, but that's very exciting that somebody asked a question. I feel so like a celebrity when somebody asks a question, I started learning the guitar as a teenager, and the actual reason I started playing the guitar, for better or for worse, was because it was a small and portable instrument, and I had played the cello and the bass guitar, and then having a small and portable instrument that I could walk around in the woods with and do psychedelic drugs, which is why I was walking around the woods as a teenager so much. Not the only reason. I liked walking around in the woods, but it was also an excuse to go off in the woods and do psychedelic drugs, which was a solitary experience for me for the most part. And I brought a guitar with me because it was small and I could carry it, unlike the cello, which was the completely accidental reason I started playing the guitar as a teenager. And, there were other reasons to keep playing it later, but that's how I started. And you guess how many songs I've written? I think at least 500 now. At least maybe 600, I don't know. that I have actually sort of kept track of anyway. Last time I counted was like 400, but that was years ago. So, but as I always say, it's about how good they are rather than how many. Lots of people write lots of things that are just junk. You can look at the internet, you can see that. But if you can write something good, and if you can write a lot of things that are good, that's great. But sometimes, every once in a rare while, some songwriter that I think is just thinking that they should give me a compliment, but they really don't like my material, they say, "You sure write a lot of stuff." Something like that. It's just kind of like complimenting the dress of the pianist. Anyway, back to the album. Well, I sort of aborted that 8th track, which is called "When the Students Took the Embassy." It's about the takeover of the CIA/American embassy in Tehran in 1979, and it's a good song, but I don't remember how it goes. And this one I remember, because this one I was actually singing on a tour. The last time I was on tour was in Australia for a week. It ended very quickly just before St. Patrick's Day, when the borders were all closing, and I changed my plane ticket and came home. But I actually did play this song with on the tour, and so it's easier to remember that way. And it's one out of 3 prisoners at San Quentin in Marin County in California currently have COVID-19, and of course it's spreading across the prison system throughout the country, along with the elder care facilities and lots of other places, slaughterhouses, farms, all kinds of other places. And one of those folks who's in prison right now is in Texas is Alvaro Luna Hernandez, and I only heard about Alvaro Luna Hernandez just like last fall when I wrote this song, and he is one of so many people who I would hope would be getting a lot more attention around the time of this movement that's going on. He's kind of a classic example of somebody that maybe if what he was in prison for had happened a lot more recently, perhaps he'd be more in the news and more talked about. I don't know, but there's probably so many other examples like him. But he was as a young person, a very active critic of police violence, police brutality, police racism in the United States, in occupied Texas, where he grew up. And he became a well-known critic of the police and was beaten by them first time when he was only 15. And ultimately, as a young man, he was visited by the police and was certain that he was about to be executed. And so in self-defense, he grabbed the gun from the hands of the cop and ran. And did not hurt anybody in that process, but ultimately he was hunted down and somehow managed to get captured without being killed, which was quite a phenomenon in itself, as they were firing huge amounts of ammunition in his direction. And currently he is in prison in Texas, serving a 50-year prison sentence for having only done something to try to prevent himself from being murdered. And he is potentially up for parole if he survives. He's in his early 70s now, I believe. But if he doesn't die of COVID-19 and manages to survive into 2021, he's legally up for parole. We'll see what happens. But this is a song I wrote about him when I heard about him. Alvaro Luna Hernandez started life with a shorted hand, growing up in Texas on occupied land. His troubles with the law and with the sheriff of Alpine resulted from a racist gang crossing every line of respect for human decency. Vicious thugs in blue who have ruled the hills of Texas since long before 52. In the middle of the 20th, when Alvaro was born, it wasn't long before the first time that he was torn from the streets of Alpine to a windowless cell, when the cops kicked in his head till no one could tell if he'd live or die, and somehow he was breathing still when the morning sun was shining in the Texas hills. Alvaro Luna Hernandez grew up to lead the fight against police corruption and for human rights. Falsely accused of murder, incessantly harassed, a young life in constant danger, quickly flying past. So on the day a cop came to his house, pointed his gun, Alvaro knocked it out of the officer's hands, and he did run. Alvaro Luna Hernandez hid out underground after the biggest manhunt in West Texas. They fired many rounds. He managed to surrender without being shot, and that was the last breath out of prison that he ever got. The trial was a sham. He was given 50 years, sentenced by the machine to be ground up in the gears. Since 1996, a quarter century ago, in solitary confinement, they've kept our Alvaro. He's now lived to be an old man, and whether he ever leaves, justice in the USA exists only for the thieves who came and stole this country, declared it to be theirs. Slave masters in power, Chicanos in the crosshairs. Alvaro Luna Hernandez started life with a shorted hand, growing up in Texas on occupied land. Thank you, Bev Grant. I wrote a song for Elijah McClain yesterday, and you can hear it on wherever you're watching this, in case you haven't. And today I'm doing a little album release party, running through the songs that are on my new album, Notes from a Failed State. And if I tried to do something I just wrote yesterday, I don't think I could, because it's a weird thing with writing songs. You write a song, you record it, and then you forget it, at least for me, unless I practice it. This is another one that I actually have practiced because I toured last fall playing this song all over, I don't know, different countries. And after I recorded another album in October with some wonderful musicians in Ireland, and it's called Strangers and Friends. You can also find it on all the streaming platforms. And after recording the album, I wrote this song, which is why it's on the more recent one. Although Strangers and Friends, that album includes some fantastic, lots of wonderful vocal harmonies and penny whistle and Aylin pipes and all sorts of cool stuff. Yeah, Howard says that was a tragic story. Here's another tragic story. I kind of specialize in tragic stories. say it started long ago. Keep one lifetime in your sights. How's that go? After bragging about how I remembered this song. You could say it started long ago. Keep one lifetime in your sights. People were marching for basic civil rights. Marchers were attacked. The press made wild claims. Anything that happened, Republicans were blamed. The mood that was incited, quite intentionally, all over the 6 counties in the loyalist community, was an atmosphere of hatred, the kind that burns and kills if you live in the wrong house or stand too close to the windowsill. In the pogroms of 1969. With torches, pikes, and guns, neighborhoods were attacked, supported by police, if anyone dared fight back. And fight back people did, kept the loyalist mobs at bay. Far more homes would have been destroyed if not for the IRA. Defensive lines were formed as best as could be done. 50 buses hijacked and lit up in the summer sun, surrounding the burned out shells of the houses of Ardoyne, while just beyond them Orangemen sang the Battle of the Boyne. In the pogroms of 1969. Thousands fled the carnage. Hundreds of homes burned down. There was a refugee camp in Dundalk as big as any town. The British Army invaded the north and started building walls, separating ghettos from the bog side to the falls. If you want to understand the world you live in, you have to peel back the layers and look beneath the skin. If you do that, you may find that so much of these troubles began half a century after the Black and Tans. In the pogroms of 1969. You could say it started long ago, or keep one lifetime in your sights. People were marching for basic civil rights. Yeah, it's wonderful lessons of obscure history with incredible heart platitudes you can't accept, says. And yes, it is so obscure, isn't it? I mean, you can go your whole life growing up in places like England and not realize that just across the Irish Sea there were pogroms happening that your government was deeply involved with. And yeah, people didn't know. People still don't know. Some people, some few more people knew because I wrote a song about it. This song, let's see. I think I can remember it. It has a really cool riff. I either will get it or I'll not. Let's see. Is that it? Oh, yeah. One day you're working, next you're not. What you have is what you got. You lost the job you thought you'd keep. You wake up at night, you can't sleep. You got time now, time to dream. Time to break down, cry and scream. And the earth spins round again. Sometimes your goals of any size just vanish in front of your eyes, and all that's left is what you see, like the squirrel outside your window in that tree, and the man there on the screen who wants us to try injecting Listerine, and the earth spins round again. The dice are up, no telling where they'll land when they come down from the air. Everything can change and fall apart, can affect your lungs and your heart. Assumptions thrown there in the breeze. Who knows what they'll be when we're done with this disease, and the earth spins round again. One day you're okay, things are all right. Then all of a sudden, overnight, foreclosed, evicted, living in cars, empty hotels and wine bars. Wake up to learn our collective fate depends on how we cooperate, and the earth spins round again. And the earth spins round again. That's the 11th track on the album, and on the version that's on all the streaming platforms, there's 12 tracks. On Bandcamp, there's 3 more bonus tracks, but this is the last of the tracks on the Spotify, on the streaming platforms, and I also made a poster with the lyrics of this song with Kalindi's. Well, Kalindi made the poster. I wrote the lyrics. Let's see. I have a keyboard in front of me, although it's, for some reason it's off. I mean, I know why it's off. It was off. Because every time the baby here tries to play the keyboard, the toddler stops her. There's really not much to be done because the toddler clearly thinks it's his piano. And, just can't bear to have her playing it. And my theory is that she's going to become like a astoundingly talented concert pianist, all based on having been prevented from playing the piano when she was a baby. We'll see. See if the theory holds. Yeah. I think the slogan, "Free the Imagination, and other slogans from the late 60s in France, like be reasonable, demand the impossible now, that Rob Johnson wrote a wonderful song about, based on. I was thinking of that, and like a one thing I saw on a wall from Paris '68 said, "Those who lack imagination cannot imagine what is lacking." That's also on my posters I've been putting around. And I think at times like these, we have to be able to think about, think outside the box. What are we trying to create here? There's lots of possibilities, but they're limited by a lot of things, including our ability to imagine what we're looking for. It's moments like these, everything is in the air. The possibilities are nowhere and everywhere. You gotta break a bone to set it, and now all we are is broke. There's a lot of folks who are saying it's time to be woke, and they're not talking about microaggressions, but the really big ones. The basic assumptions, like planets circling suns, but there are no natural laws that built your mansions or your tents. These are creations of society, just like mortgages and rent. It's a future of uncertainty. But our liberation can only be as free as our imagination. If you were born and raised to believe it's sacrosanct that whoever has a whole lot of money in the bank deserves to then live off of the wealth from the houses they own, and if they raise your rent you can move out or take out a loan, then how can you demand your human rights if you don't believe you have any, as if you deserve your plight? But if things were hard before, now the system has flatlined. Time for those basic rights to be redefined. It's a future of uncertainty, but our liberation can only be as free as our imagination. All these vaunted freedoms added to the Constitution as an afterthought after Shays' Rebellion did not include the right to land or the right to eat. Oh, the right for human beings not to be dying on the street. It's moments like these, standing on the edge, that we might catch the strongest breeze to land furthest from the ledge. We can fly, All you need is wings. We can house and feed each other. Together we can do anything. It's a future of uncertainty, but our liberation can only be as free as our imagination. That was the last track on the album, and actually, I'm gonna abandon you all and finish working on a song that I was writing before I started doing this album release party. Song about July 4th, particularly this July 4th. Bookchin wrote some great stuff about imagining the future we want to see as being integral to the revolutionary project. Yes, absolutely, James Arnett. I completely agree, and I love Bookchin. My favorite quote from him, James writes, is that that is probably, quote, the assumption that what currently exists must necessarily exist is the acid that corrodes all visionary thinking. Oh, beautiful. That is fantastic. Wonderful quote. And thanks, Mark and Bev and Dylan and everybody else for tuning in. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you've enjoyed it too. And interesting to note how much of a bigger audience we have for the album release party than I ever get from my interviews, which is not surprising, I suppose, because maybe you are following me on one of those platforms because you like my music. So that kind of makes sense. But that's what I'm doing on the weekdays is lots of interviews. And if you happen to be a musician or a poet and want to join my open mic, I'm doing every Monday. Pandemic open mic Mondays is 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT every Monday. And then my interview shows are every Monday, every weekday, Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And yeah, you can, yeah, don't need to make any more announcements because I think you already know all that stuff anyway. But yeah, this has been an album release party. One person, living room, quiet album release party. Well, it was kind of noisy at times. Notes from a failed state. And now, if you're really hardcore fan, then you can watch this space because I'll be posting a song sometime, probably in the next few hours. Yeah, about July 4th, called "Born on the 4th of July," because whoever made that wonderful movie doesn't get to keep that phrase all to themselves. Keep on keeping on. Don't pay the rent. Oh, on that note, check out artistsforrentcontrol.org. My main project, other than interviews and songwriting and parenting, is organizing the rent strike and related activities. Artistsforrentcontrol.org. Especially if you're around Portland, but also if you're somewhere else looking for some ideas for how to do this sort of thing. Not that I have all the answers, but I got a couple, at least 3 of them. Okay. Take care, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in cyberspace and eventually in the streets and on the road, or on the road and in the streets, or some combination thereof. Bye for now.